That night, August 12, 2023, the old industrial district on the outskirts of Houston, Texas, lay wrapped in silence. The once busy lanes that used to echo with roaring engines and the clatter of machinery now sat abandoned, littered with forgotten memories. Most of the streetlights were dead, leaving only flickering amber glows that struggled against the dark. A dry southern wind swept dust across the cracked asphalt, whispering through rusted gates and empty warehouses. At the far end of the road, a weary minibus driver named Eddie Collins was finishing his final shift of the night. Eddie parked near a dimly lit corner of the Pasadena terminal, lighting a cigarette to fight off the creeping drowsiness. The smoke had barely touched his lips when a strange odor sliced through the air, sharp, putrid, unmistakably rotten. He frowned, glancing toward the direction of the smell. A white box truck sat by the curb, unmoving. It wasn't the first time he'd seen it, 3 nights in a row, parked in the exact same spot. He'd assumed it was abandoned. But tonight, the stench was unbearable, clawing at his senses. From a narrow slit in the truck's rear door, something thick and dark dripped onto the pavement, almost like blood but laced with a chemical tang. Eddie's pulse quickened, dread and curiosity wrestling inside him. He stepped closer, shining his phone flashlight into the gap. The beam caught something pale. The stench hit him like a punch and he gagged, stumbling back. Trembling, he grabbed his phone and dialed 911. Within minutes, sirens screamed through the night. 2 patrol cars arrived, their red-blue lights reflecting off the rusted metal walls. Detective Mark Sullivan, a sharp-eyed investigator from the Eastwood Police Precinct, stepped out. His calm presence carried weight, the kind that silenced chaos. "What's happening here?" he asked. Eddie's voice shook. "Detective, that smell is coming from that truck. I think something's dead inside." Mark gestured to his team. 2 officers took position while others pried open the padlock with a crowbar. A small crowd began to form, neighbors drawn by curiosity and fear, only to be pushed back behind the police tape. With one violent pull, the doors swung open. A wave of putrid air burst out, thick enough to choke. People screamed and covered their faces, even a few officers stumbled backward. Inside the truck, stacked in perfect rows, were human bodies. They were unnervingly clean and pale, lifeless but not decayed. Each face frozen in eerie calm, some with eyes still open, staring as if pleading for release. For a moment no one spoke. The silence was suffocating. Detective Sullivan froze, his mind racing. In all his years he had seen grisly murders, gang violence, bodies in rivers, but nothing like this. The sheer number of victims, their careful arrangement, the unnatural preservation, it all screamed planned. "Secure the area. No civilians beyond the tape," he barked, his voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. Soon another vehicle rolled up. A woman stepped out, composed, professional, carrying a large medical kit. Dr. Rebecca Hayes, a respected forensic pathologist from St. Mary's General Hospital, climbed into the truck. Her gloved hands trembled slightly as she examined the first row of corpses. "There are 36 in total, Detective," she said quietly, almost to herself. Mark exhaled. "Dear God." Dr. Hayes studied one of the victims closely. Time of death, likely simultaneous. No bruising, no resistance marks. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, and how to keep them preserved. That night, the forgotten industrial block of Houston transformed into the scene of a waking nightmare. The air itself seemed to shudder with dread. Detective Sullivan knew this case would ripple far beyond Houston, maybe even across the entire country. And deep in his gut he sensed it, this was no ending. It was only the beginning of something darker, something that would unravel secrets buried far deeper than anyone was prepared to face. It was the kind of revelation that dragged everyone deeper, into a pit of secrets waiting to swallow anyone who dared to touch them. Outside, the restless crowd still gathered, shouting for truth, unaware that the answers they demanded might cut far deeper than they could bear. That afternoon, the interrogation room at the Eastwood Police Precinct felt colder than ever. The fluorescent light flickered weakly above a scarred wooden table. A faint haze of cigarette smoke hung heavy in the air, curling slowly toward the ceiling. Sitting across from Detective Mark Sullivan was Mr. Walter Harris, a man in his early 60s with a snow-white beard and eyes that carried the weight of too many sleepless nights. His hands trembled slightly, but his gaze remained steady, as if forcing himself to relive something he desperately wished to forget. Beside Sullivan sat Dr. Rebecca Hayes, pen poised, ready to record every word that fell from the old man's lips. "Start from the beginning, Mr. Harris," Sullivan said quietly, though his tone carried the pressure of command. Walter took a deep, shaky breath. The night before that truck was found, I was walking home from evening prayer around 9. The streets were empty, just the buzz of a few broken streetlights. When I passed that old abandoned warehouse near Baytown, I saw a white box truck parked there. The driver stepped out, but he didn't look like any driver I've ever seen. He stood tall, neat, too clean. What I'll never forget, detective, was his clothes. He was wearing a doctor's coat. The room fell silent. Dr. Hayes immediately turned toward Sullivan, her eyes wide. "A doctor?" Sullivan repeated slowly, his jaw tightening. Walter nodded. "Yes, sir." He opened the back doors of that truck. I caught a glimpse, something fell out. It looked like a hand. A human hand. He shut it fast and drove off before I could do anything. I wanted to run, but my legs froze. I didn't dare go near it. Sullivan drummed his fingers on the table, his mind racing. This wasn't a random act of violence. The precision, the pattern, it all pointed somewhere higher. The involvement of a medical professional was the confirmation he dreaded. "Could you recognize him again if you saw his face?" Sullivan asked, voice low but intense. Walter hesitated, then nodded. His face was shadowed, but his posture, the way he carried himself, I'd remember that anywhere. Sullivan leaned back, eyes narrowing. "For your own safety, Mr. Harris, you can't tell anyone about this conversation. Do you understand?" Walter swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "I do." The fear in his eyes said the rest. Meanwhile, inside the forensic lab at St. Mary's General Hospital, Dr. Rebecca Hayes led her exhausted team. Rows of lifeless victims lay in cold storage, silent witnesses to something monstrous. The air was still and sterile, broken only by the hum of machinery. As Dr. Hayes examined the 34th victim, a young man with a faint puncture wound at the base of his neck, she suddenly froze. Her trained fingers felt something impossible. Pulse, weak but unmistakably alive. "Oh my God, he's still breathing," she whispered, disbelief quivering in her voice. Without a second thought, she shouted, "Get me oxygen now." Page Detective Sullivan immediately. The quiet morgue erupted into motion. Nurses rushed in with 4 bags and oxygen tanks as the victim was wheeled to the emergency bay. His body was ghostly pale, lips blue, skin cold, but life clung to him stubbornly. Moments later, Detective Sullivan burst through the door, his face pale and tense. "Is it true? Someone survived?" Dr. Hayes nodded. "Barely, but he's still fighting. If we're lucky, he might speak." They both hovered over the hospital bed as the man's chest rose and fell shallowly. He looked to be in his 30s, his expression locked in silent pain. Slowly, his eyelids fluttered open. His cracked lips trembled. "Water?" he whispered. Dr. Hayes dipped a cotton swab into water and touched it gently to his lips. After a moment, he swallowed and struggled to form words. "They told us there'd be jobs. They said we'd go abroad. But in that room, they injected us, one by one, and everything went dark." Sullivan leaned closer, voice steady but urgent. "Who injected you? Tell me their name." The man coughed violently, blood staining his chin. The heart monitor screamed as his pulse spiked. His final breath came with a single name, barely a whisper. "Dr. Leonard Graves?" The word hung in the air like poison. The monitor flatlined. Dr. Hayes covered his eyes with a trembling hand, tears threatening to fall. Sullivan stood motionless beside her, his face drained of color. The name echoed through his mind like a curse. Dr. Leonard Graves, head of the Houston Department of Public Health, beloved philanthropist, the man whose smiling face adorned charity billboards and health campaigns. A figure the city hailed as a savior. Now that same name had become a shadow, one tied to a truck full of corpses. "If this is true," Sullivan murmured, voice tight, "we're not just chasing a killer. We're up against the system itself." Dr. Hayes met his gaze, her voice trembling. "If the public learns about this, they won't believe it. How could their hero be a monster?" Sullivan didn't answer. His stare was fixed on the lifeless man before them. The room felt colder, heavier. And the last word the survivor spoke, "Dr. Leonard Graves," echoed in his mind, marking the beginning of a war neither of them were ready to fight. Officer Tom Reed's old sedan sat hidden deep behind a thicket near the marshy grove, its lights off, engine silent. Only the hiss of the wind through the wet leaves and the restless hum of crickets filled the humid Texas night. Creeping carefully through the undergrowth, Detective Mark Sullivan and Jason Miller kept low, their boots sinking in the mud. Through the tangled branches, the abandoned warehouse near Baytown emerged, a white structure gleaming faintly under the harsh beam of a rotating spotlight. Two guards in white coats stood still at the entrance, unmoving like statues. From inside came the faint, rhythmic hum of heavy machinery, steady, mechanical, chilling. "Take the side route by the generator," Sullivan whispered. Jason nodded, and they moved like shadows, pausing whenever the spotlight swept past. From afar, Officer Reed blinked his flashlight twice. The signal was clear. Safe to proceed. When they reached the side door, Sullivan tested the iron handle. It didn't budge. Jason quickly pulled a small pick tool from his jacket. Within seconds, the lock clicked open. A pungent chemical odor flooded their noses as the door creaked. Inside, the dim light revealed a nightmarish laboratory. Long tables covered in vials, syringes, and clear tubes filled with odd-colored fluids. Cabinets stacked high with files stamped with coded numbers lined the walls. Sullivan grabbed a few top folders and tucked them into his coat. "Only take what we can carry," Jason whispered, snapping quick photos with a small camera. Then, in the far corner, they saw it. Rows of iron beds, each holding a limp human form connected to 4 tubes. Some twitched faintly. Others lay deathly still. Sullivan's breath caught as he approached one. A frail young man, lips blue and trembling. "Please, don't let me die here," the man rasped weakly. Sullivan gripped his cold hand. "You won't. I promise," he whispered, though the promise burned his throat. "They couldn't save everyone, not tonight." "There are too many," Sullivan muttered. "We take one. Enough to expose this whole operation." Suddenly, muffled footsteps echoed from the hallway. They ducked behind a tall metal cabinet just as 2 people in white coats entered, pushing a cart of 4 fluids. "Raise the dosage," one said. "Everything must be finished before sunrise." The pair left without noticing them. Sullivan exhaled quietly and reached for his radio. "Rebecca, do you copy?" Dr. Rebecca Hayes' voice crackled softly through. "Ready. I'm in position." Sullivan and Jason loosened the bindings of the dying young man. As they lifted him, the overhead lights flickered violently, then went out. Red emergency lamps buzzed to life, bathing the room in a crimson glow. A cold, mocking voice erupted through the intercom. "I've been expecting you," it drawled. "Dr. Leonard Graves. You really thought you could walk into my facility unnoticed? Every door you opened, every step you took, I led you here. I wanted to see how far your courage would carry you." Sullivan's jaw clenched. This wasn't an accident. It was a trap. Graves' voice grew sharper. "Leave now and I might let the others live. Defy me, and they all die before dawn." Sullivan looked at Jason, fury and dread in his eyes. "We're taking him. Whatever it costs." Outside, Officer Reed spotted several black SUVs arriving at the compound. Dozens of armed men fanned out across the property, flashlights cutting through the rain. He radioed in, voice trembling. "Detective, they're here. You're surrounded. Get out now." Sullivan looked down at the barely conscious man in his arms. "We don't leave him." Jason nodded grimly. They started moving, careful and fast. Graves' taunting voice echoed again. "Good luck, detective. Tonight you're not the hunter, you're my prey." A drizzle began, slicking the concrete as Sullivan and Jason hauled the young man toward the rear of the warehouse. The red light pulsed overhead, painting their faces with blood-like color. "I have more exits than you have hope," Graves sneered from the speakers. From his hiding spot, Officer Reed could see armed guards flooding every corner. His grip on the radio shook. "Don't go near the main door, they've sealed it." Sullivan scanned the room. The only way out was a narrow passage at the back. Jason pointed toward it. "Service corridor, let's move." They rushed through, dragging their barely breathing survivor. Outside the fence, Dr. Hayes waited in the rain, gripping a flashlight, heart pounding. Rain poured harder, soaking her hair and clothes. "Hurry," she hissed into the radio. "They're at the right fence line. I see movement." Inside, Sullivan and Jason reached the service exit. Locked. Jason jammed his knife into the latch and twisted furiously. Footsteps thundered closer. "Search every corridor. Don't let anyone out," a voice shouted. The lock snapped open. The door flew wide, letting in the cold night air. But before they could move, 2 guards appeared. Jason struck first, slamming one across the face with his pistol. Sullivan kicked the other square in the ribs, then hoisted the wounded man over his shoulder. "Move to the back fence." Dr. Hayes spotted them through the sheets of rain. "This way. There's a break in the fence," she cried, waving her flashlight. The 3 sprinted through the mud as gunshots cracked behind them. Reed fired twice from his position, his shots exploding in the air, not to kill but to draw attention away. "Go." Reed yelled over the radio. "I'll stall them." His voice was drowned by thunder and gunfire. Sullivan, Jason, and Rebecca reached the rusted fence. Jason kicked at the bottom until the metal bent, creating a narrow escape. They shoved the young man through, Rebecca pulling him to safety, followed by Sullivan and Jason. Beyond lay a stretch of dark, rain-slick woods. "Into the trees," Sullivan ordered. They plunged into the wet brush, branches snapping underfoot. The young man moaned, half-conscious. Behind them, Graves' voice returned, now cold and calm. "You took one. Perfect. One is enough for me to know which fool dares chase the truth. But truth means nothing if you never live to tell it." Sullivan looked back toward the warehouse, now ablaze with lights and search teams. "You're wrong, Graves," he muttered. "One voice can destroy your empire." They broke through the woods, emerging onto a narrow dirt road where Reed's car waited, headlights dimmed, engine idling. His face was streaked with rain and mud. "Get in now. They're right behind you." Sullivan and Jason pushed the wounded man into the back seat while Rebecca immediately checked his pulse, hands trembling. "He's alive, but barely." "Then we keep him that way," Sullivan said. The old car roared to life, tires skidding over wet gravel. Reed's knuckles whitened on the wheel as the headlights of black SUVs flared behind them. "They're closing in." "Don't look back," Sullivan ordered sharply. "Just drive." Jason rolled down the window slightly, pistol ready. "If they get too close, I'll slow them down." Rebecca held the young man's cold hand. "Stay with us," she whispered. "You're not dying tonight." The man's breaths were shallow, eyes unfocused on the trembling car roof above him. Sullivan turned forward, the rain blurring everything into streaks of gray and red. Tonight they had saved one soul, but gained a dangerous truth. And in the thick silence of the chase, they all knew it. Dr. Leonard Graves wouldn't stop. The hunt had only just begun. Reed's battered sedan fishtailed through the downpour, wipers useless against the storm. The road was slick, narrow, and treacherous. Behind them, black SUVs loomed closer, their lights cutting through the mist. Almost there. Reed yelled over the roar of the rain. Sullivan sat motionless, eyes locked on the road ahead. "Keep steady. If we lose control now, it's over." In the back, Jason's grip tightened on his gun, jaw clenched. Dr. Hayes shielded the young man's fragile body, her voice a trembling whisper. "Hold on, son. Just a little longer." Outside, thunder cracked across the Houston sky, signaling not an end, but the start of a far darker storm yet to come. The young man's chest rose weakly, his skin paling under the dim light. Dr. Rebecca Hayes pressed down with trembling hands, desperation breaking through her calm facade. "He's fading fast," she whispered, panic edging her voice. Detective Mark Sullivan clenched his jaw, eyes locked on the road ahead. "Stay with him, document. He's the only one who can end this nightmare." A deafening explosion cut through the storm. The rear tire burst, jerking the car sideways. Officer Tom Reed fought the steering wheel, teeth gritted, but the vehicle skidded violently and slammed to a stop on the muddy roadside. Steam hissed from the hood. "Damn it!" Tom shouted. "The tire's gone, we can't drive." Headlights flared in the distance, cutting through sheets of rain. "They're gaining on us." Sullivan flung the door open, gun drawn. "Get him out, move." Jason Miller hoisted the limp boy, while Dr. Hayes held the four-bag steady. Reed grabbed their gear, and the four of them plunged into the drenched forest, branches whipping at their faces as thunder rolled above. Behind them, shouts echoed through the downpour, closer every second. The forest swallowed them, thick and suffocating. Sullivan led the way, pushing through the brush, while Jason guarded the rear, weapon ready. Rebecca stayed close to the wounded youth, her soaked hair clinging to her cheeks. "They're in the woods," Tom hissed, catching flickers of flashlight beams weaving through the trees. "We need cover," Sullivan said grimly. "Something that slows them down." Then the roar of rushing water filled the night. They stumbled upon a raging river, swollen by rain, its current thrashing violently. Rebecca hesitated. "Detective, the current's too strong. If we stay, they'll find us," Sullivan cut in. "We cross. Now." Jason plunged into the freezing water, Benny slung over his back. Sullivan followed, wading against the current, gripping Rebecca's arm as she nearly slipped under. Tom stumbled behind them, gasping. The river battered them mercilessly, dragging at their legs, but they pushed on. Finally, soaked and shaking, they reached the far bank, alive but barely. The boy still breathed, faintly, his pulse fragile. Behind them, voices shouted from the opposite shore, but the raging water drowned their tracks. Sullivan led them to a narrow trail, nearly invisible through the brush. His face was stone, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. "We can't return to Houston. The department's been compromised, they'll brand us fugitives before sunrise." "The old clinic in Pasadena? Jason, you said it's still there?" Jason nodded. "If we make it by dawn, maybe?" Rebecca held the boy's cold hand, tears mingling with the rain. "If he makes it to morning, it'll be a miracle." Tom muttered, "Dr. Graves won't stop. He's already hunting us." "I know," Sullivan said quietly. "So we run faster." "Tonight isn't about winning," he said, voice hoarse. "It's about surviving long enough to tell the truth." They trudged through the storm, mud sucking at their boots, bodies shivering uncontrollably. Each step was a war against fatigue and fear. The boy's fragile body was more than a burden. It was the key to exposing a monster in a doctor's coat. And somewhere, hidden in the darkness, Dr. Leonard Graves waited, patient as a hunter stalking his prey. The rain finally softened to mist. Sullivan kept pushing forward, cutting through the fog. Jason still carried the limp youth, face pale with exhaustion. Rebecca guarded the four, her eyes hollow but resolute. Tom's weak flashlight flickered, scanning behind them. At last they stumbled upon an old dirt road. Dawn was bleeding through the clouds. An abandoned outpost loomed nearby, crumbling but still standing. "We rest here," Sullivan ordered. Inside, Rebecca laid Benny on a broken cot. His pulse fluttered faintly under her fingers. She reattached the slipping fore and wiped his clammy face. "He's slipping deeper. If we don't get real medical equipment soon, he won't make it," she said softly. Sullivan looked at her, voice low. "Then we buy him time." Tom fiddled with a static-filled radio by the cracked window. A faint broadcast pierced the noise. Detective Mark Sullivan wanted for abduction and murder of a key witness. Citizens are urged to report any sightings. Tom's head snapped up. "Sir, listen to this." The room fell silent. Rebecca covered her mouth in disbelief. "They're painting us as killers," she whispered. Jason slammed a fist against the wall. "Graves turned the system against us. He's faster than we thought." Sullivan exhaled slowly, meeting their eyes. "Then we fight with what he fears most, the truth. That boy stays alive. Whatever it takes." Rebecca leaned close to Benny, whispering shakily, "Don't give up. You're the only one who can stop him." Outside, morning broke through the mist. Birds sang, mocking the silence inside. For them, dawn meant not relief, but the beginning of another chase. The low growl of an engine broke through the stillness. Headlights flickered through the trees. Sullivan tensed, gun drawn. Tom killed the radio and peeked through the cracks. "Someone's coming." A rusted pickup rolled down the muddy path, sputtering. Sullivan sat tense in the front, eyes on the driver, a weathered man named Hassan, face worn by years of loss. "I know who you're running from," Hassan said quietly. "My nephew joined Graves' so-called medical project last year. Never came home. If your boy can prove what happened, I'll help." No one spoke, but their gratitude hung heavy in the damp air. After hours on the slick road, the truck reached a small village at the forest's edge, wooden houses on stilts, chickens scattering in the rain. Hassan pointed toward a fading white building. "An old nurse lives here, Mary Harris. Trust her, but be quick." They carried Benny to the door. Rebecca pressed his chest as his breathing faltered. The door creaked open, revealing an older woman, gray-haired but sharp-eyed. "Hassan, what trouble have you brought to my door?" He bowed slightly. "Mother Mary, this boy escaped Dr. Graves. Only you can help." Her eyes hardened at the name. "Inside, now. And keep your voices low." The clinic smelled of disinfectant and age. Mary's wrinkled hands moved with precision as she checked the boy's pulse. Blood pressure's collapsing. "He's minutes from coma." Rebecca nodded, working beside her. Sullivan paced restlessly, Jason and Tom guarding the windows. Suddenly, the sound of helicopter blades thundered overhead, rattling the walls. Tom cursed under his breath. "They found us." Mary's voice was calm but grave. "Then you must choose hide or run. This place won't stay safe." Sullivan looked at Benny, then at his team. "We move tonight," he said. "No turning back. Whether we live or not, the truth must survive. The truth must come out." Above Houston's skyline, a police helicopter sliced through the dusk like an eagle hunting its prey. The city lights flickered to life below, but in the outskirts of Pasadena, shadows moved with a purpose darker than night itself. The wind carried the scent of rain-soaked soil and crickets echoed through the stillness. Inside a rundown clinic once run by Mother Mary Harris, A flickering oil lamp cast trembling halos on the cracked walls. Detective Mark Sullivan stood over a worn map spread across a dusty table, one drawn by Jason Miller's late friend. It marked forest trails, drainage paths, and a single route leading toward the river. Officer Tom Reed sat nearby, twisting the dial of a battered radio, trying to catch a signal. Jason guarded the doorway, weapon raised, every sense alert. Across the room, Dr. Rebecca Hayes and Mother Harris worked feverishly over Benny's fragile frame. His pulse was weak, his body pale, but the seizures had stopped at last. Harris adjusted the four-bag, her hand steady despite her age. Rebecca exhaled shakily. "He's stable for now," she murmured. "But he won't survive the night here. He needs a real hospital, equipment, staff, everything." Harris nodded grimly. "If you stay, you'll bring danger to every soul in this village." That helicopter was just the first warning. Mark's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. This place was compromised. He turned to Tom. "Did you reach your contact?" Tom sighed. "Yeah. A journalist, Arif, in downtown Houston. He's been tracking Dr. Leonard Graves for months. He'll meet us at the port of Houston, but he wants proof." Mark's gaze fell on Benny. "Then our only proof is him. If he wakes up, if he talks, the truth gets out." Jason's voice was low, edged with anger. "If he survives that long, Graves won't stop until Benny's silenced." The room fell silent. Outside, the distant bark of dogs broke the quiet, a warning. Someone was searching nearby. Mark raised a hand. Stillness. Two shadows passed the dirt road outside, then vanished again. The team waited until the threat moved on. Only then did Mark speak, calm but resolute. "We leave tonight. Tom drive. Jason guard the rear. We take Benny and move fast. If they catch up, we fight." Hassan, an old local farmer, rose slowly, his face set in grief and fury. "My nephew vanished last year. Said he was joining Graves' outreach program. Never came home. If he was one of the victims?" His voice broke. "I'll help you. I want the world to know." Mother Harris stepped forward, holding a wooden box. "These are copies of old hospital records. People Graves treated, people who disappeared. Maybe it'll help." Mark accepted the box with trembling hands. "We'll make sure their voices are heard." At midnight, they left Pasadena in Hassan's old pickup. The headlights stayed off as they wound through narrow dirt roads. The only sound was the groaning engine and the rain starting to fall. Jason sat in the back beside Benny, rifle in hand. Rebecca kept a trembling grip on the four-line, whispering reassurances. Up front, Tom drove like his life depended on it, which it did. Hassan muttered, "If we take the main highway, we'll hit a checkpoint." Mark snapped, "Then we take the north trail through the old rubber fields." Slower, but hidden. The pickup rattled violently over potholes. Benny stirred, groaning weakly. Rebecca leaned in, her voice soft but urgent. "Hold on. We're getting you out." Suddenly, headlights flared behind them. Two black SUVs tore through the dark, closing fast. "They found us," Tom shouted. Gunfire ripped through the night, bullets slamming into the truck bed. Jason fired back, sparks lighting up the road. "Push it, Tom," Mark yelled. The pickup roared, shaking as rounds shattered the rear window. Hassan shouted, "Right? Shortcut to the river." Tom swerved hard. The truck fishtailed. Rebecca screamed as Benny's body jolted. "If we keep this up, he'll die," she cried. Another round hit, a tire burst. The pickup skidded, spun, and the engine sputtered dead. "We're done," Tom gasped. Mark didn't hesitate. "Out. Move him now." They hauled Benny out on a stretcher, sprinting toward the sound of rushing water. Mark fired behind them, bullets sparking off metal. Hassan pointed ahead. "There. The raft." They threw Benny aboard, pushing off just as gunfire shredded the shoreline. The current seized them, dragging them into the darkness. Rebecca wrapped her arms around Benny, shielding him. Jason reloaded, eyes scanning the tree line. Hassan clung to the edge, trembling but determined. Overhead, the moon vanished behind clouds. The chase had just begun. The current turned violent. Water slammed against the raft, threatening to toss them into the black depths. "Stay low," Mark shouted. Rebecca's face was wet with tears as she checked Benny's pulse. "He's fading. If we don't reach help soon, he's gone." Mark's chest ached at her words. But survival came first. The raft struck a rapid, nearly throwing Rebecca overboard. Mark caught her in time. Jason turned, shouting over the roar. "If we stay on the river, they'll find us. We need cover, now." Hassan pointed west. There's an old plantation near Baytown. Graves used to store his supplies there. If we enter from the back, they won't expect us." Mark nodded. "Let's move." They steered toward shore, stumbling onto the muddy bank. Voices shouted in the distance. The hunters were close. Hassan pointed to a rusted staircase. "That leads to the roof. Hurry." They climbed fast. Jason covered the rear, returning fire. From the rooftop, they saw SUVs flooding in below, floodlights blazing. "We're surrounded," Tom muttered. Mark scanned the chaos, then spotted a steel cable linking the roof to another building. "That's our exit." Jason didn't wait. He clipped himself on and slid across under heavy fire. Sparks rained from the cable. One by one they followed. Rebecca and Tom nearly slipped with Benny's weight. Mark was last, sliding through gunfire, heart pounding. They made it, barely. But the relief died instantly. A calm, cold voice echoed through the shadows. "Impressive. Truly impressive." Dr. Leonard Graves stepped from the darkness, his white coat spotless, his smile glacial. Beside him stood Commissioner Walter Harris, pistol in hand. "This ends here," Harris sneered. "Surrender, and I might let you breathe your last in peace." Jason raised his weapon. "You're just Graves' pawn. And pawns always fall first." Then, faintly, a whisper, he injected us. Graves, and the cop." Everyone froze. Benny's eyes flickered open. His voice weak, but his words enough. Rebecca gasped. "He's conscious." For a moment, Graves' mask slipped. Then he sneered, "No one will believe a dying boy." Before he could finish, floodlights exploded through the windows. Tactical teams swarmed in. "Leonard Graves. Walter Harris. You're under arrest for mass murder and human experimentation." Harris's face drained of color. "No, you can't, everyone's bought." The lead officer's voice was steel. "Not everyone. We have recordings, witnesses, and your victims." Graves turned to Mark, eyes burning. "You think this changes anything? There will always be another me." Mark met his gaze coldly. "Maybe. But not tonight." The task force closed in, cuffing both men. Harris resisted, Graves smirked till the end. Tom dropped to his knees beside Benny, tears streaming. "We did it, boss, we did it." Rebecca sobbed quietly. At least now, the truth breathes again. As dawn broke over the port of Houston, Mark watched the horizon. His body was weary, but his spirit unbroken. Jason stood beside him, hand on his shoulder. "This isn't the end," Jason said. "Graves' network could still be out there." Mark nodded slowly. "Then we keep fighting. Because truth doesn't die, it only waits to be heard." Sirens wailed across the dock. Ambulances, reporters, survivors, chaos and hope intertwined. The name Dr. Leonard Graves, once worshipped as a healer, now condemned as a monster in white. And amid it all, Mark and his team stood under the rising sun, battered but victorious, carrying one silent vow. The truth will never be buried again.